Story 1. No one was allowed in or out of the house on New Year's Day until my red-headed uncle came to visit. It is considered good luck if the first person to enter on New Year's is a redhead. There were 10 kids in my mom's family. Poor Uncle Bill was run ragged by 2 p.m. Story 2. My mom always told me while I was growing up that I could wear any color nail polish I wanted, except for red. She said, "It's a color that is typically associated with sex workers." It was so strange. Story 3. If I had a friend over, went to a friend's house, went to the mall with a friend, or even played outside with other kids one weekend, I better not ask to do anything the following weekend. Many weekends I spent alone in my room. I was an honor student too. At 17, I had a 9 p.m. curfew on Saturday nights. Story 4. Always talk to the cat in a normal voice and not in the baby talk voice people use with pets, because he might think you're silly. He probably does anyway. Story 5. Meals were served in order of age. My parents ate first, followed by my older brother and sister, and then me. We never ate together. Story 6. Soft drinks are often considered adult beverages. Imagine my surprise when I attended a birthday party in kindergarten and the mother began serving soft drinks to us 5-year-olds. As a rule follower, I expressed that I wasn't allowed to drink it since it was meant for adults. The mother assured me that my parents would not mind if I had a glass. I remember feeling very upset with my parents after the party because I felt embarrassed. Story 7. I had to share any food I brought home, even if I purchased it with my own money. My mom did not cook or keep food at home, but she ate out every morning. Story 8. Not being able to use the couch cushions, pillows, and blankets because they were only for decoration when we had guests over. It turns out my mom has untreated obsessive-compulsive disorder and only disclosed this to us years later, which explains much of her behavior. Story 9. When we were little and the Avon lady would come knocking on our door, my mom would tell us to be very quiet and not make a noise because it was the mean Avon lady and she had a gun. We totally believed her, and it wasn't until I was in the 8th grade that we moved, and my little sister's friend's dad sold Avon at swap meets. We asked if he had a gun, and her friend looked so confused. We figured then that my mom was just telling us a story to make sure we were quiet, so she didn't have to open the door and deal with the Avon lady. It is still one of the silliest memories of my childhood, and up until my mom passed away 4 years ago, we would give her such a hard time for it. Her response was always, "Well, it got you to be quiet," and she always went away. I don't know if it's really a rule, but maybe it was. We were never to answer the door to those women. I miss my mom so much. Story 10. There are no closed doors to bedrooms and bathrooms, even when you are sleeping, taking a shower, or using the restroom. I find it difficult to use a public restroom because, even though I know it is unlikely, I am afraid someone might get upset with me for closing the stall door. Story 11. The interrupt rule. If we wanted to talk to our parents while they were talking to someone else, we would place our hand on their arm. They would acknowledge this by placing their hand on ours, and then we would keep our hands there until they turned to ask us what we needed. I did this to a teacher, and I will never forget how confused, and frankly a little startled, she looked when she saw a child touching her arm and staring at her while she was talking to another teacher. Story 12. My dad used to tell us that we weren't allowed to touch the painted parts of the car because it would mess it up. We were only supposed to touch the handles. This belief became so ingrained in me that even as an adult, I thought that car paint could be easily ruined. It wasn't until I worked in the automotive industry that I realized it is actually quite durable and designed to withstand being on the road. Story 13. We were not allowed to invite a friend over for a sleepover 2 times in a row. They had to host first before we could invite them again. Looking back, I think this was my mom's way of avoiding sleepovers. Story 14. When our father got home from work, we were sent to our rooms, sometimes until the time he left the next morning. He would get home and not want to interact with us, so we would be sent across the house, checked on occasionally, and punished if we got too loud. Luckily, I had my older brother, but it got lonely. It was better than being around our father because he was mean and aggressive. He once left black and blue belt stripes across my brother's back for jumping on the bed again. When I was 2 or 3, he put me in timeout, facing the corner. Then he fell asleep, and hours later, I wandered off to play. He woke up and got angry that I had left. So he came into my room, grabbed me by the ankle, and lifted me upside down to administer a thankfully brief beating. When he called us out of our rooms, he would scream our names, and we were so scared he was going to yell at us or hit us. The rule was simple: when Dad gets home, go to your room. Story 15. We were never allowed in their bedroom, not even if we were sick or scared. We would stand at the open door and call for them. Story 16. My parents would check my brothers and my teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth, before we went to bed. If they thought we were trying to skip brushing, they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs and would make us brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real that we would constantly ask when we would be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them, but by the time we turned 13, we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. Story 17. Having to change clothes, such as shorts or tank tops, when relatives or family friends came over, so that the men or boys wouldn't look. Story 18. We weren't really allowed to lock the bathroom door. It wasn't a rule, we just didn't. We only had one bathroom for 5 of us. It was rare to bathe or shower without someone else needing to use the space. In the mornings, my sister would style her hair in front of the sink while someone was in the shower, and then another person would come in to use the toilet or grab laundry, which we left in a pile on the floor. The bathroom was big enough for all of this. Additionally, my mom was quite comfortable being naked, and I think she disliked folding laundry. We had clean clothes, but they were all stuffed in a large laundry basket in the pantry, located at the other end of the house from the bathroom and bedrooms. So we made partially clothed dashes down the hall through the kitchen to the pantry to find outfits. Surprisingly, I have no trouble using the toilet in front of anyone and conversing with them at the same time, or vice versa. This has been positively noted in my last few relationships. It also came in handy when I had kids because they seem to know when I sit down and barge in to ask me something. I am also very comfortable being naked, and no one I've dated has complained about that either. Story 19. We were only allowed to eat candy on Sundays. Then my sister ate a large amount of candy on Sunday and threw up everywhere. Story 20. You can only wear jeans once a week. You cannot change at school by hiding jeans in your backpack. Your mom will come and check and make you change. No black eyeliner, as wearing it is considered inappropriate. No crying in public, as it may cause embarrassment to the family. Story 21. If there was an event, such as an after-school activity or a birthday party, and it fell on a workday, it was an automatic no because they were at work. On days off, it was still a no because they wanted to enjoy their time off. If I offered to be dropped off or picked up by a friend's parents, or even if I considered walking, it was also a no due to concerns about safety. My daily routine consisted of waking up, going to school, coming home, eating dinner, and going to bed every day. I had a very lonely childhood once people realized I would always decline invitations. Story 22. My dad never allowed me to watch The Simpsons growing up. When I turned 18, I watched it and loved it. Story 23. We weren't allowed to refer to either parent as he or she. We had to use mom or dad or acceptable variations. Story 24. If mom's bedroom door is closed, do not knock. Do not open. If one of us has a severed arm, ask yourself, do you really need to knock on her door? Maybe it wasn't a rule, but we knew the guideline. Story 25. I have 2 experiences I haven't seen mentioned. 1. You must wake up at 6 a.m., regardless of the day, and would be punished if you failed. I often did fail as I had undiagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder at the time, which led to frequent arguments. They said it was to prepare me for the adult world. I now don't wake up anywhere near that early for my actual adult job. I was not allowed to interact with males because they were worried about me getting into a relationship while I was still in school. As a result, my closest relationships growing up were with other women, and now I identify as gay. Story 26. All steak had to be well done. I didn't know anything less than well done existed until I went to college. Now I take my steak medium. Story 27. We were not allowed to help ourselves to snacks, and whether we had lunch depended on which parent was home and their mood. Story 28. We weren't necessarily allowed to get hurt, at least I wasn't. My dad deemed it unsightly and unladylike. I liked to climb trees as a kid, and he noticed I had a scab on my arm when I was in 5th grade. He grabbed me by my arm and yelled that it made me ugly and that no boy would ever love or want to be with me if I had a bunch of scars. When I responded, "I hope a boy wouldn't not want to be with me over some scars on my skin. That's shallow," he got mad. Turns out he was right, but it wasn't about physical scars. Nobody wants to be with someone covered in the emotional scars he left. He also told me I was fat that same summer and wouldn't allow me to eat past 5 p.m. because I'd get fat, insisting that nobody likes fat women. I had to ask for permission to eat and follow his strict regulations until I was about 17. If I ate outside of his restrictions, he berated me. I now have a very complicated relationship with food and my body. There's plenty more to say, but yes, my dad was difficult. Story 29. Painkillers and medication are only allowed as an absolute last resort. I had no idea painkillers and over-the-counter medication were used so often by other families, or that people regularly visited doctors. Growing up in my family, things had to be incredibly dire before you could obtain medication or painkillers. Sick with a stomach bug or cold. Do you need to go to the hospital? No, then get up. No medication. Severed a ligament in your knee, which you should definitely go to the hospital for? Walk it off. No painkillers. Story 30. We were not allowed to eat the candies on the Christmas tree until the priest came to bless the house and the tree, which usually happened after New Year. We had to look at all the candy for 1 to 2 weeks but couldn't eat them. I remember one year we had some amazing treats on the Christmas tree, like chocolate Santas, full-size chocolate bars, and even cola cans. We never had cola in our everyday life. It was agonizing. Story 31. Women and girls were not allowed to whistle. I loved whistling and was very good at it. The rule was eventually softened to no girls whistling in the house. A whistling woman and a crowing hen never will come to a very good end, was the accompanying limerick. I responded by becoming an extremely well-practiced all-state piccolo player. Story 32. We couldn't talk while at the dinner table, which is why my siblings and I are fast eaters, finishing our meals in 5 minutes or less. This habit has definitely affected my ability to sense when I am full. I can binge eat like no one else. My husband can finish 3/4 of his food and feel full, while I can eat my portion, finish his plate, and eat the rest of the sides. It's overwhelming. Story 33. I thought it was normal to not have a door to my room. I had my door taken off when I was 10 and got it back when I was 13. Story 34. I couldn't listen to modern music because it was all inappropriate. Turns out my parents, mainly my mom, were just subtly racist. She forced us to listen to her music, which focused on sex and drugs, but was all performed by white artists. Story 35. Shut up was considered a swear word in our house. If we asked our parents if our friends could hang out in front of a specific friend, the answer was immediately no. I had to request a sleepover with a friend 7 days in advance. Anything less than that was immediately denied. Doors were locked at 8:30 p.m. If we tried to come home after that, we had to sleep on the porch. We had a box on the porch that contained pillows and blankets for this reason. I was not allowed to sleep in later than 9:15 a.m. on weekends. Story 36. No feet are allowed on furniture. I liked to sit cross-legged on the couch, which upset my dad every time. Years later, as an adult in my mid-20s, even when I brought my wife over to my parents' place, he got mad at me for not telling her to keep her feet off the furniture. My wife has never sat in a seat normally in her life, and she was taken aback at first. She started to put her feet on me while I sat normally. It seemed minor overall. As an aside, the first thing I did when I moved out and got a couch was put my feet up on it. Story 37. We couldn't flush at night, so in the morning there would be a lot of waste in the toilet. This honestly felt normal, but I now realize how strange that is. Story 38. This is my favorite story from my friend who escaped a controlling mother. Their family couldn't use beach towels when they went to water parks, the pool, or the beach because they were too nice to get dirty. They also couldn't use regular shower towels because those couldn't go outside. Instead, Each person received one small microfiber cloth to use throughout the day. Story 39. My parents said that we had to have either an acceptance letter from a college or a leave date for boot camp on the day we graduated from high school. They never mentioned what would happen if we didn't, as that wasn't considered a possibility. Story 40. One of my cousin's parents had something called grown-up candy, which was basically candy they were told was only for adults since they were young. It was actually their favorite candy too. She was 16 when she discovered that almond joys were suitable for children. Story 41. You have to say hello to the plants. Every morning, greet the houseplants. Respect the greenery. Spend time there. I will love that now. I am going to follow it always. Story 42. I had to drink 2 full glasses of milk before being allowed a cup of diet soda. The room at the top of the stairs with the short door was the monster room, and I wasn't allowed to open it. It was just a storage closet. There wasn't even anything interesting inside. Story 43. I had to address every adult by their last name, using Mr. or Mrs., even when they preferred to be called by their first names. It amazes me that I was expected to call someone Mr. when they were 28 years old and I was only 12, especially when they wanted to be called Sam. This approach undermines the preferences of the other adults. Story 44. My mom told me that children weren't allowed in the grocery store after a certain hour, so she could leave us in the car and be alone in the store. Story 45. No growing out fingernails. My dad used to use his knee to hold my head on the floor while he twisted my hands behind my back so he could cut my fingernails as short as possible. Story 46. Not mine, but my mom says my grandma used to have them remove all their clothes except for their underwear in the hallway as soon as they came home. We suspect she had untreated obsessive-compulsive disorder. Story 47. If Dad was watching television, we had to sit still in our chairs. No lounging on the couch, no talking, and we definitely could not be on the phone. That was Dad's quiet time. I learned to read in my room to avoid him. Story 48. Not leaving your room for any reason after 8:30 p.m. was enforced. The only exception allowed was for emergencies, such as a house fire. A camera with motion detection was pointed directly at my room, ensuring they always knew when I left. They learned the hard way that if I was not allowed to go to the bathroom at night, I would end up wetting the bed and coming to their door in distress. Consequently, I was permitted to use the bathroom, but that was the only allowance. Story 49. The current rule here is no food in the living room. Our children sit in the foyer with their snacks. Adult friends follow the rules until the kids go to bed. This saves me from digging crumbs out of the couch, and it is much easier to mop spills on tile than on carpet. I remember the first time I ate in the living room as a child. It was liberating. Story 50. Comparing my experiences with my sister, who earned straight A's, I often felt inadequate. I struggled academically, leading teachers and family members to label me as the dumb sister. This perception persisted, making me feel like I was never enough. My parents believed I was pretending not to be smart, resulting in punishments such as losing my phone, being spanked, and being yelled at for my perceived lack of intelligence. Profoundly affected my self-esteem. When I transferred to a smaller school with smaller class sizes, I found relief. The teachers were unaware of my sister's achievements, so I no longer faced comparisons. They took the time to explain concepts, and when I encountered difficulties, they were attentive. One teacher, in particular, noticed my struggles and asked me to stay after class. I confided in him about the expectations my parents had due to my sister's success. That day, my father picked me up, and the teacher spoke to him in my absence. Following that conversation, my dad began to understand me better. I don't know what the teacher said, but it made a significant difference in my life. Story 51. Our dogs were allowed on the couch, but we weren't until my dad moved out when I was almost 16. There were many other amusing things as well, but that one is particularly funny. Story 52. No drinks until you complete your dinner, including water. Additionally, no video games or use of tablets during the weekdays. Story 53. My dad would block channels on the cable box and then take the remote to work. If we were lazy with our chores, he would take the entire cable box. Story 54. No drinking during meals until you're finished eating. My mom became tired of us filling up on liquids instead of eating our food. Story 55. Not a rule, but I never eat anywhere my dad couldn't have beer or wine. I was actually jealous of my friends who got to have McDonald's Happy Meals. Story 56. We were not allowed to use the stove, microwave, can openers, or knives. My parents cooked meals only about 6 times a year. This created a complicated relationship with food. Story 57. I wasn't sure if I thought it was normal in the sense of being common, but I believed it was acceptable. I was not allowed to use the bathroom after a certain time in the morning because my dad wanted to reserve it for himself. Story 58. My parents would watch any movie before us. It didn't matter the rating. It could have been rated G, and they would still have to watch it first before allowing us to see it. If they didn't like it, thought it was unsuitable, we didn't get to watch it. That rule lasted until about their 4th child. I am the second oldest of 6. Story 59. Not me, but my husband. If he or his siblings farted, their mom made them clean the toilet as punishment every time. Story 60. Not my parents, but my grandma used to watch me while they worked. We weren't allowed to say fart, but instead used past gas, as it was considered rude and not ladylike. We also couldn't say pregnant and had to use expecting or going to be a mom instead. It's ironic because my parents didn't really care about what I said. I guess my grandma was just very strict about her choice of words. Story 61. Not a rule, but my parents had me so convinced I had to eat the crust of bread because it was the most nutritious part. I was almost 30 years old before I realized it's just well-done bread. Story 62. The dinner table is for intellectual conversations about world events. We were required to bring a topic for discussion daily, with no small talk allowed. I was never asked about my day or anything I do. I used to enjoy presenting opposing points of view, such as those of historical figures like Hitler, Pol Pot, and Stalin, to provoke my parents. Story 63. If we were ever trying to promise we were telling the truth and said, "I swear," my mom would respond, "Don't swear." It drove me crazy. That's not what people mean when they say swearing is bad. Her first language is English too, so to this day I don't understand it, but she was oddly particular about many things. Story 64. My stepmother enforced a strict rule from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. No phone calls were allowed before or after this time, no friends could visit, and we were not permitted to wake her up for anything. This rule even applied on Christmas morning, although they did allow us to come out of our rooms at 8 a.m. She would also listen for us in the bathroom to ensure we washed our hands. If she suspected we hadn't, she would check to make sure the sink was wet. Story 65. You cannot bang or knock your spoon against the side. Only silently scrape it against the bottom of the bowl or carefully stir in a teacup. When I reached the age to eat at others' houses, I was shocked by all the spoon banging happening. Story 66. 5-minute alert. You've been on the phone for 5 minutes. It's time to get off. My dad only allowed everyone in the house to be on the phone for 5 minutes at a time because the phone is a tool, not a toy. If you stayed on the phone after being alerted, he would just unplug it. Story 67. I lived with my mother and her partner at the time. I wasn't allowed in the house unless my mother was home, so I had to wait outside after school until she arrived from work, even in the cold winters. The partner would also spend hours in the bathroom every day, and if my sibling or I needed to use the bathroom, we had to go outside in the yard. I wasn't allowed to use the internet at home, even though we had it. I wasn't permitted in certain rooms and couldn't cook or touch anything in the house. I moved out when I was 16. Story 68. No marbles, bouncy balls, or small spherical objects of any kind. I thought this rule was because my brother inhaled the ammunition of his homemade blowguns. The first time it was one of those individually wrapped cinnamon jawbreakers you get at Halloween. The second time it was a pipe cleaner he had wadded up and coiled into a ball. He's probably the only person in the world who has inhaled a pipe cleaner whole. Turns out that playing doctor just wasn't adventurous enough for him. Instead, he and one of our neighbor girls decided to play their own version of Hungry Hungry Hippos. He'd shove all of the marbles from the game into her hungry hippo, and then she'd jump up and down to get them back out. Story 69. I was not allowed to flip coins. It had something to do with how flipping coins in public made you look like an old-time gangster. This was back in the 1990s as well. Story 70. No dating anyone until I had known them for a year, and I had to talk to them every day for that year. Miss a day and start over. In practice, I knew it was impossible, so I never even tried. In retrospect, I think they wanted to keep me from dating before I got my driver's license so they didn't have to take me places and pick me up. But because of that rule, I didn't date anyone until I was in college. To be honest, I knew this was not at all normal. Story 71. I was not allowed to sit in the aisle seat at the movies because someone might stab me with a drug needle. As an older person, it seems unlikely that someone would share their drugs. Story 72. If I went out at night, I had to be home by midnight. Otherwise, I would be locked out and have to find somewhere to spend the night. I was never given a house key. Story 73. If I go out with my friends and have fun tonight, I am not allowed to go out with my friends and have fun tomorrow. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.